Hello and welcome to the interview here on France 24. I'm Robert Parsons, and my guest today is David Sater, a distinguished American journalist and academic, and the author of 3 books about Russia, a country which he first visited as a student in 1969. Since September last year, he had been working in Moscow as an advisor to the US broadcaster Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, and working on a new book about Russia's post-communist history. Imagine his surprise then, and dismay, when in December the Russian authorities told him he was banned from entering the country for the next 5 years, one of the few Western journalists to be expelled from Russia since the end of the Cold War. His offence? A minor visa violation. The competent organs, he was told, had decided that his presence on the territory of Russia was not desirable. Well, David Sater, welcome to the programme. The competent organs. Now, what's that all about? It sounds like something out of George Orwell, doesn't it? I mean, surely visa violation, that can't have been it.
Well, the visa violation, so-called visa violation, was simply something invented by the Russian authorities after I was told that I was persona non grata to muddy the waters and confuse the outside world. There was no visa violation. I carried out the instructions of the very Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which is now claiming there was a violation. They refused to give me necessary documents on time and said I should wait for those documents. Then when they finally gave me the documents, the visa issuing office said that I was there too late. But this was a delay created by the Foreign Ministry.
And for the uninitiated, what are the competent organs?
The competent organs are the security police, the FSB. So what I was told on December 25th in the Russian embassy in Kiev was that the competent organs, in effect the FSB, had ruled that my presence on the territory of the Russian Federation was undesirable, and I was barred from entering. So this is really a very unusual thing because this is a formulation that's generally used in spy cases. Yeah. Sometimes there's a situation where someone is suspected of espionage, they can't prove it, they simply say he's undesirable.
Okay, so what's your best guess? What's this really about?
Well, I think it's about, I did not have enough time in Russia. I was only there 3 months. Most of that time was spent getting set up in an apartment and taking care of bureaucratic formalities. I didn't have time to write very much, so it was based on what I had done in the past and what I might do in the future.
And you've been quite provocative as well. It has to be said. You wrote a book, 2003, I think, called "The Dark Darkness at Dawn: The Rise of the Russian Criminal State," and in that book, you rather pointed the finger at Putin himself and the FSB for a series of apartment bombings in 1999, which ended up ultimately in the Second Chechen War. 300 people killed.
Well, those bombings were the event that were what brought Putin into power, because they galvanized the country behind a new war in Chechnya, and then that war was pursued more successfully than the first Chechen war, and with the result that there was a huge spike in Putin's popularity. Now, all evidence points to those bombings having been a provocation organized by the authorities themselves, including the fact that when a fifth bomb, there were 4 bombs, and then there was a 5th bomb that was found in the basement of a building in Ryazan was discovered, and the people who put it in that basement were arrested. They turned out to be not Chechen terrorists, but FSB agents. And there's no question about that. They were arrested and identified. So it's not a question of being provocative in my writing. It's simply a question of reporting and being willing to lay out the incontrovertible facts.
But even the title of the book isn't likely to have won you many friends in Russia. The rise of the Russian criminal state.
Well, at the time, it was considered a rather, how can I put it, a rather strong statement. But since that time, we've had other books. For example, Luke Harding, the former correspondent in Moscow of The Guardian,
also
wrote a book
expelled.
called Mafia State. And the U.S. Embassy in Moscow did, in their cables, which were published by WikiLeaks, referred to Russia as a mafia state. So I don't know if you want to consider criminal state different from mafia state, but I consider it more or less the same thing.
At a personal level, how do you feel about this? Over 40 years going to sort the Soviet Union first and then Russia. It must be quite a blow to you.
Well, it is, but on the other hand, I'm quite determined to go back. I think that sooner or later I will. I don't think they'll be able to make this stick in the long run. And as I've been told that I'm barred for 5 years, I'm not sure Putin's going to last for 5 years. So I fully expect to be back.
What about support from within Russia? Has there been much either in the media or from civil society?
Yes, absolutely. On social networks, been a lot of support, and in the media as well. The Memorial Society issued a statement calling on the Russian authorities to allow me back, and they said that if I wasn't allowed back in, it would be bad for me, but more important, it would be bad for Russia. And there were similar statements from other Russians. Andrei Piankovsky, a Russian journalist, wrote an article in which he attacked those who were attacking me. And even in Izvestia, there was an article in which is linked to the regime, an article about me describing the reasons why I might have been banned, said that I was someone with whom it would be possible to have a dialogue. Moscow Times said that, described me as the Kremlin's bête noire, but gave the reasons why I, in fact, was merely doing my job.
Well, that's encouraging, isn't it, that there has been that sort of response? It does suggest that civil society in Russia hasn't been crushed completely by the regime.
It hasn't been, but it needs support.
But is what has happened to you, do you think, a signal that journalism is going, both internal, domestic Russian journalism and foreign journalism, is going to be a target of the Putin regime in the months and perhaps years ahead?
Well, it's perfectly likely. We saw what happened with the TV Rain television station, which was perhaps the only independent television outlet in the country, and we can expect that perhaps that what's left of the free press in Russia will be subjected to the same kind of pressure that I've been subjected to. But it's important to try to resist that.
Well, how do you do that? You've been a critic in the past of President Obama's reset policy. What is the advice that you would give to the American administration, for instance, about how to deal with Russia?
Well, it's the same advice I've been giving them and which they've ignored for the last 5 years, which is treat Russia as it is rather than as we would wish it to be. It doesn't mean that we cannot have any contact with Russia, that we cannot deal with them. We can. But a normal society, a society which is based on law, a society with democratic institutions, needs to be the society that defines the rules of the relationship. You don't want an abnormal society setting the context for bilateral relations with a normal society. It should work the other way around.
But perhaps, as Westerners, we're just getting it wrong about Russian society. After all, Vladimir Putin remains a remarkably popular president, far more popular than either Obama or President Hollande here in France after just, 2 or 3 years in power. He's still in the 50%. It's extraordinary. I mean, why does he have that support still, do you think?
Well, partially because they've created a situation in which he has no opposition, and people are afraid that there will be instability and possible social unrest if he's removed from office for whatever reason. In terms of active support, the numbers are far lower, and they're based really on a propagandized provincial population that gets its news and information from only one source, which is state-controlled television.
Do you think that given a different set of economic circumstances, collapse, for instance, of the oil price, that support for Putin could collapse in Russia?
I definitely would. Definitely would. I mean, it's only the relative prosperity that's helped him maintain the popularity that he presently has. I mean, Obama and Holland are operating in a democratic society in which they're subjected to criticism. Putin is operating in the context of a political system which he totally controls, and on the basis of a controlled media which is able to disinform millions of people.
Going back to yourself, you have suggested that the United States should expel Russia Today journalists as retaliation. Why do you suggest that?
I said I wouldn't be opposed to it. I think that this is one possible retaliatory measure that the United States should consider. The idea, of course, is not to exclude Russia Today. No one minds that they're in Washington. They're welcome to produce their distorted broadcasts as much as they like. But if it's a question of the Russian regime excluding honest journalists, then we should look around for whatever means are available to us to put pressure on them to give us the opportunity to report truthfully.
Okay, David, that's all we have time for, I'm afraid, today. Thanks very much for being with us on France 24. That's the end of this edition of The Interview, but don't go away, there's more news and headlines to follow.